All right, car's been running pretty good. As far as reliability, it seems fairly reliable. I haven't had any problems. This carburetor doesn't like high altitude. I'm sure it needs a jet change. I'm just gonna be focusing on drivability stuff at this point. The main thing is it wanders down the road, and I think that is just due to looseness in the kingpins, looseness in the wheel bearings, and potentially some of the steering stuff. So we'll take a look at all that. I have new kingpins for it, so we're just gonna try to tighten everything up all at once. Just go through the basic fluids and make sure everything's topped up. And also the headlights still don't work from when I changed the radiator out because I haven't taken the time to put them back together. And then I also want to try to get the hood back on it and see if I can make the hood fit decently. So got about 2 weeks to get all that done. Let's get started. All right, we're up on jack stands now. Got it as high as I could because it's easier to work on that way. So we can get in here and look nice and dirty, but kingpins are right here. If I shake the wheel, we should be able to see movement there if the kingpins are bad. If the movement is between the backing plate and the drum here, then the bearings are loose. I think both are problems, but let's look and see how much this moves. So if I grab the wheel, should be able to see that movement in the kingpin. I think there's a little bit in the bearing, but that's mostly the kingpin. So I'm gonna get this all pulled apart and clean up what we can clean up here and assess what we find. All right, everything's out of here. It's all extremely dirty, of course. Shoes, they have decent thickness, but they're pretty grooved. There's some cracking going on right there. Doesn't look very good. So they need to be replaced. The drum is pretty severely grooved, but this is a stamped steel drum, so these can't be turned down. And I know that eventually I want to go to a cast drum, so I'll probably put it back together with these brakes because I don't have money or time right now to do the cast drums. I'm just trying to get this wobble fixed, and then we'll come back with the cast drums and do the brakes all at once. Another problem here, this brake rod is bent. If you see that, the brake rods should be straight because when you step on the brake, it pulls it, and as you're stepping on the brake, it's pulling the bend out of it. So some of your braking force is sent to dealing with this bend. It's same on the other side. Actually, the other side's worse. So you want straight brake rods. I actually have new brake rods for it, so I'll probably throw them in right now too. Or maybe I'll just wait till I do the brakes for real. And then next thing, with the backing plates off, I just need to remove the tie rod and the drag link here, and then the brake rod from there. Every tool's got a hammer side, right? Here's your cotter pin. You gotta get that drag link off first before that's gonna come out. So this is the drag link. So that comes from the steering arm down there. So when you turn the steering wheel, that moves forward and back, pushes forward and back here, which is connected to the spindle, and that turns the wheel. And then this one back here that we took off earlier, that's the tie rod, which ties the two wheels spindles together so the wheels turn together. Last thing here is the brake rod. We're just going to detach that. Okay, so for the spindle to come out, the kingpin has to come out. Kingpin will just go straight up. This is a locking pin that prevents the kingpin from coming out. And I believe it's also a steering stop. So when the spindle turns this way, it hits there. And to get that out, just a bit, these can, from what I've seen, they can be pretty stuck. All right, that one's moving. So there's that pin. Now the kingpin can slide up. We also need to take this brake actuating rod out so the kingpin can slide out. Then I gotta be careful here because there's usually some, I believe there's some shims. All right, everything's apart. Time for the worst part, which is cleaning everything. Wish I didn't have to do that. There is the driver's side kingpin. I don't really know what a good one looks like. My bet is that this is usable, but I already have new ones that I got with the bushing kit, so I'm just gonna throw the new ones in. And here's the passenger side. This one was actually more difficult to get out. It's pretty dry on the top, but I just used a jack and put a rod in the bottom of it and then jacked it out with a floor jack, basically. But came out just fine. So I need to clean up all these parts now. And this is everyone's least favorite part about working on cars, just cleaning all this junk, which is why a lot of people don't do it. But I don't like putting stuff back together nasty, so I'm gonna be cleaning all of it. We have this Harbor Freight parts washer in the back corner here, and last year I cleaned it out, got it ready to use again, except I never ended up buying solvent because the amount of solvent that I'd have to buy, it was looking like it was gonna be like $300 or something. So I don't use this. And even with the parts washer, you know, you don't really want to put stuff that's this nasty in there because you just dirty up the parts washer too fast. So you still have to kind of do an initial cleaning. And if you guys have better ways of doing this, let me know, because, you know, I always wanted to be able to do this a little bit faster. Did this on the whole Plymouth project to clean all those parts. Just have some sort of solvent, a small amount. So this is acetone, but, you know, diesel or whatever you got, minerals, spirits, I don't know. I kind of just use whatever's laying around. Also, it's just a scraper. So I've got a couple bins. So I use, this is actually like, I think a cat litter box. And then I have an old paint tray that I don't care about. So I just will scrape. You know, this stuff has been cleaned up before. Obviously, it's not like it's never been touched. So it's got this dried up grease that comes off in chunks, and you can't get to the Zerk fitting at all. So you got a wire brush and clean all around there. So try to get the majority off with the scraper, and then I just come with the wire brush and try to get a little bit more off, because I'm gonna go to the wire wheel next, and I don't want this stuff flung all over and just making that wire wheel disgusting. And just some brake clean. Trying to not have it be wet when I go to the wire wheel, because then it'll just fling this junk everywhere and stick. And there's still some stuff left on it, but it's a lot better. So that's after wire brush. And then the last thing I like to do if I can is clean up the threads on anything that, you know, is this old, if I can find the right tap and die. So this is this brake actuator thing, 7/16-20. Kind of hard to figure out sometimes when they don't go on smoothly, but I know this is right. Hard to clean threads out with the wire brush, so this makes it so they're nice and smooth. And now it's smooth as can be. So our brake actuators are done. The spindle lock bolts are done. This is the actuating arm that goes inside the spindle. I cleaned the bearings up. I think they're gonna be fine. There's not much play in them. They look good. So we'll just repack those and put them back on. especially since I found out a new set of bearings is about $100. I'm sure I could find them cheaper, but with the races and the seal, actually the seal is interesting because I didn't find an inner seal when I took these out, so I might look for an inner seal. Apparently the dust cap, Ford didn't have a dust cap in 1930, but you can buy them and add them, so I'll probably get some of those. This all took a few hours to clean all this stuff, and I've still got to do both spindles and the steering arms and the drag link and the tie rod, and so it's just putting in the time and getting the work done. What are you doing? I'm gonna get you. All right, all this stuff cleaned up. Dad's over there buffing out his new paint job on the hood. And then friend Daniel's over here helping driving the old bushings out. We're going from the bottom to the top since it's tapered top to bottom. Coming out really easy. They're ready to get replaced. I think the kingpins are okay, but I have new ones anyways, so we're just replacing everything. Okay, so everything's pretty well clean. Drag link's all cleaned up. This is the tie rod, clean. So we're kind of ready for paint. We need to put the new bushings in the spindles, which I think I might do before paint. I've also removed all the grease fittings, the old grease fittings, and I've ordered a set of modern Zerks to go in. And that's just because the old ones, here's some of them, or these, they don't have a check valve and you need a special fitting on your grease gun when you fill them. So we're just gonna change them all out to modern ones. And then this is the spindle kit here. All of our new bushings right there. And they actually sent us new, I don't even know what you call these pins that hold the spindles in. So I didn't need to spend time cleaning those up, but oh well. These are the bearings that the weight of the vehicle rides on. They go underneath each kingpin here. So they go like that. And then that drops into the spindle. Taking these over to Dave, who's a friend in the Model A's in the area, and he's going to help install and ream the kingpin bushings, because you have to, once they're in, you have to ream them to make sure that they're the exact right size to fit the kingpins.
All right, and the only thing I try to do when pressing, obviously you want to line up the grease hole.
Yes.
With the grease hole. And then I try to keep it as square as I can. You'll still potentially see some metal shaving, but yeah, it is what it is.
So that's an original tool?
Mm-hmm. Not made by Ford, but made just for Model A and Model B Fords. Do you work on other cars other than Model A's, Taylor?
Yeah, I also have a 65 Plymouth Fury that I just rebuilt the whole engine and pulled it out of the woods and driving now.
Nice.
I was surprised, but the Model A is way more fun.
I love Model A's, clearly. I mean, I have several of them.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd like the Model A as much as I did, but I bought it and then just fell in love with it. 40 miles an hour, no radio, no nothing, just, yeah.
40 horsepower, whether you need it or not. Yeah.
I think there might be something wrong with mine. It's got the previous owner put a Stromberg downdraft on it, and the throttle linkage is a little touchy, so I think that may be contributing to.
Here are a couple of hints on how to make your downshifting better. Have your idle speed be as low as it can be, and this I think is the biggest secret. I run 50% of that 600W oil and 50% STB. Because the sooner you can spool the gears down in the transmission, the quicker you can do an appropriate shift.
Okay, I'll have to try that. If I want to do a long trip with it, do you think it's worth my time to pull the pan and look at the Babbitts?
No.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. Because you really can't you can do the rod bearings easily with the pan out. To do the crank bearings, is it doable with it in the car? Yes, but you'll never get a good reading. So you have to pull the engine, flip it upside down.
Okay. So just send it, basically.
Oh yeah, send it.
Okay. I really do want to do a long trip, though. Is there anything that I should be looking at or worried about before? If it just runs and drives good, then just go, or like.
The only advice I can give you is know as much about all the systems as you can.
Yeah.
But, my wife and I, the reason we got into Model A's is 4 days after we retired, we took this one, we drove it to San Diego, Florida, Maine, Washington, and back. It was my retirement. Yeah, that was my retirement gift. And the secret I've found to doing these is never ever, this is why I don't phone out my reamers, turn the reamer backward. You turn the reamer backwards, you have to resharpen your reamer. I've got a pretty light pressure on it. I'm probably putting about 5 pounds of pressure, no more.
So what is the purpose of doing this?
To make the kingpins fit. Take a kingpin and try fitting it in there. See how far it goes.
They're undersized because they're meant to be reamed.
They are definitely meant to be reamed.
So for them to fit, and then also for them to be, for it to be straight?
Straight,
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
All right, so our painted parts are all painted up, pretty much ready to go. I'm waiting on the new grease fittings to press in here. I'm also waiting for the tie rod end rebuild kits. Front axle cleaned up, and I'd really like to remove the whole thing, replace the spring, paint everything, but that's not gonna happen right now, so we just kind of cleaned up the area we're working in and painted that. So that's all done. And now one of the other things I can work on until we get the parts is brake rods. So this is front brake rod, and you can see it's bent there. Not really sure why, if that was on purpose or not. I've got a full new set of brake rods here, front, rear, and emergency. Also got all the clevises, nuts, and clevis pins. I think right now we're just gonna do the fronts because the rears are a little bit difficult to do without the rear drums and backing plates off. And the rears don't look to be bent. So right now I'm just gonna do the fronts. All right, those are out of there, and you can see how bent they were, especially that passenger side one. That's the passenger front clevis pin, almost sheared. And then this is the driver rear. Looks about the same. Also, all of our grease fittings just came in the mail. I don't know where they're all supposed to go. These are threaded, these are threaded, these are just a press fit. The turned ones, I'm pretty sure they're supposed to go in the top of the spindle here so that you can get it from the side, but that's not going to fit in there without it being drilled and tapped. And the steering arms were kind of being a pain in the butt, so I didn't take them out, and I'm not drilling and tapping that. So what I'm going to do probably is just throw these straight on press fit ones in. They look like they're going to fit really well. Pretty sure that you can still access these. You just have to turn the wheel left or right to be able to access them, so you can't grease them with the front wheels pointing straight. So, but that should work out just fine if I push those in there. So they make these like special grease fitting driver tools, but you can also just come over to the junk drawer and find a socket here. 9/32, quarter. So 1/4 inch socket fits just about perfect for a driver. Okay, so this top one here, can't swing a hammer on it because of the steering here. This is just a quarter drive extension, and it does actually fit right over. I want to hit it with the air hammer, but I don't have the right bit. I only have like this pointy bit and like a chisel, so I'm using a rivet gun. This is a little bit softer than an air hammer, but I don't know if it's going to work. We might have to figure out how to get this bit on my air hammer. Let me see if I can get this bit in the other gun. All right, I got it. And this thing has no regulator, probably a bit too much power now, so. Okay, I got a socket so that it'll stay inside there and not jump out. That worked beautifully. Nice and flat. If you can figure it out, air hammer is the way to go. I did the first one with just a socket and a big hammer, and that was a lot. It took a lot of effort to get it done, so I probably wouldn't do that again. Unless that's all you got, obviously, you got to do it, so. Okay, so now that I've got the grease fittings in, we're pretty much ready to go here. This is the top thrust bearing. I feel like that should have some grease in it, so I'm going to pack it and then just cover everything else. Grease in the kingpin holes and the axle just to make sure nothing is sticking. Kind of did the driver's or the passenger side here a bit. I had it all together and I got them mixed up. So this is the correct passenger side. But when I was putting the locking pin in, I couldn't get it to go all the way in. I ended up damaging the new one. It seems like it was just way too tight, and I think this was because I had the wrong kingpin in. So hopefully with the correct one it'll be better. So I put the correct one back in and still felt like it was too tight when I put the new one in. So I went back to one of the old ones and put this one in, and you can see original location where it was sitting is this one on the right, and then that's the new one where I hammered it to. So still not going very far in, even with the correct kingpin in there. I also put it in the hole without the kingpin in, and it goes in just fine. So it's binding up on the kingpin too quickly, I think. So what I'm gonna do is go and put the driver's side together, see how that goes. Hopefully that goes a little bit better, and then we'll come back to the passenger side and see what's up. So here, just gonna lube everything up a bit. Thrust bearings all packed onto the kingpin. Now it's ready to go. This felt washer has to go between the axle and the bottom of the spindle there. I'm just putting the kingpin in initially to locate the felt washer here, because it'll pinch itself if you don't have it centered perfectly. And pull the kingpin back out, pinch it with the spindle. Then we can put the kingpin back in. And it goes right through the washer there. From there, we need the kingpin lock bolt that we're having a problem with, and then the brake actuating rod. So this is the brake actuating rod that needs to go in, and then I've greased up the cup there so that when the pin goes in, it's greased. So I've got that sitting loosely, and then so there it's stopping with like a 1/2 inch left sticking out, which probably doesn't matter, but doesn't matter for the operation of the car. But on the back side, we need to get a nut on there, and there's not enough thread sticking out. And I can keep hammering it, and that might be the right option, or maybe I need to grind it down to get it to sit further in. Not really sure. You can see there where it's already starting to dig in a little bit. It's like the pin is just too big. So we're gonna go back with this older used one, see if it's smaller. See, that got a lot further. That's about sticking out about a 1/4 inch there. Might be usable like that if I just smash it in there a bit. I really don't want it to get in there so tight that I can't get it out again. You just need the passenger side to cooperate also. I got both shims on here. Kit came with 2 shims, I used them both. And then I'm going back with the old lock pin here. It's really more force than I want to use, but it's in there, so I'm gonna go with that. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me later. And this is why you're supposed to, the brake actuator in before you put the pin in, because now can't get it because the kingpin won't turn anymore. So it's got to come back out, even though I just smashed it all the way in. So that's about what we have for threads there on the back side. That should be good. I like in the book, there's no torque specs. It just says tighten snugly. And the book I'm using is, of course, Les Andrews' book, the good one. Sorry, not tighten snugly, but securely tighten. No torque spec. Okay, so the weight of the car is supposed to sit on these thrust bearings here. And when there's no weight on the car, you can turn that bearing. So to check, to make sure you have the shims correct, you jack the car up off the spindle here so that the spindle is taking the weight. So we're off the jack stand, and then grab there. Now that thrust bearing should be locked in, and you shouldn't be able to turn it because it's now taking the weight of the car. So this looks like it's adjusted correctly. And the only adjustment is a couple shims between the thrust bearing and the top of the spindle there. If it's not adjusted correctly, then you'll have the weight being taken up down here, and then you'll still be able to turn the bearing. So I'm gonna move on to headlights, and I still have not done anything since I put the radiator in. So someone previously modified these, so the wiring was hardwired. They cut out the plug that is there from factory, and I don't really mind that, except I don't like that you can't take it apart without cutting it. So I'm gonna try to kind of update this a little bit. New plugs here, and I'll probably just cut these and use the socket for the light bulb, and then make a plug in between. And then here's the factory bulbs, high and low beam, not switching to LED because I like the look of the stock light bulb. And then here's our old reflectors, and I've got some new reflectors. There's actually a difference in profile of the bowl. What I've heard is like they didn't have the science figured out for the shape of the reflector, and so the new reflector has that fixed, so it's a little bit different of a shape. All right, we got some crimp connectors, so male insulated and female, they're spade terminals. That just goes into the new socket instead of having the older plug here. So that's better than just having a continuous wire that you have to cut if you need to take the wire out of here. So we can just pull those out, and they should slide through the conduit. Actually, I wasn't thinking about that. This red one might not fit through the conduit, so I might have just done all that for nothing, but I guess we'll figure that out next time I have to take it out. Dad's over here fixing the spare tire because it wouldn't hold any air, so we got new tubes. The old tube valve was busted off in there. Can't get it out. Hi there, Luna.
You don't need to.
You trying to tire shine this thing? The car's not new. Tire doesn't need to be new.
It'll wear off. It just makes it look even.
The new lenses, they have an alignment right there that goes onto the socket. I think they go that way. I don't know. I guess I'll find out if I did it wrong. Maybe that blue dot means top. Oh, it does. Cool. So blue dot, and there's a word in there and it's engraved top. So I guessed correctly. Yeah, we can put the lenses on. Cork's all done. Bulbs and lenses. Should we clean the bulbs? Probably should clean them. Well, I guess if high and low beam polarity mattered, then it would matter which way you stick the light bulb in too. Yeah. Both the pins are at the same height, so you can put the bulb in either way. Okay, so it does matter. So when you put the bulb in, you gotta test it to see if high beam is correct. So now we should have low beams and then high beams. There's low, there's high. High. Son of a... Okay, on to the next thing. So I got the tie rod and drag link rebuild kits in. So it comes with a new spring and these Teflon pucks. The stock ones are steel, and I don't know if these are supposed to turn better. At the very least, the Teflon will wear down before the steering wears down, the steering ball. So when these balls wear down, you have to cut them off and weld new ones on. Luckily, mine are in great shape here, so I don't have to do anything. But if you have steel on steel, then they both wear. If you have Teflon on steel, then the Teflon's going to wear down, and you can just replace these instead of having to replace the balls. Also got new rubber seals and metal, whatever clip thingy you call it. The tie rod, both ends are the same. Drag link one end is just like the tie rods, and then the other end of the drag link, this is the rear end of the drag link that goes on the steering box side. So it goes back there, and it's a little deeper. On these, you get spring in first, all the way into the back. It comes with new end caps, and then this puck goes right into the end cap. And then that threads in right there. And then on this end, you have a different puck that goes into the back right there. And then the spring goes in, and then this cap is a flat cap and goes on the back of the spring. I don't know why it's reversed. I'm sure there's a logical explanation, but it is. I'm going to grease up the spring, add a little bit of grease inside the end here. Just make sure it's lubricated before I pop them all on the car. And these seals drop on pretty easily. And it's not a perfect seal, but hopefully it'll prevent most of the grease from coming out and dirt getting in there. The drag link and tie rod are installed, and the book says for setting the tightness on these, run this in until it contacts the spring, and you can kind of feel it when it starts to get tight, and then you can actually see the tie rod end start to move when you start to get into the spring, compressing the spring. So when it contacts the spring, it wants you to go another turn in or turn and a half. So I'm feeling it contact about right there. Go half, one, half, and then line it up with the cotter pin hole. But it's not actually deep enough to get a cotter pin through. It won't go in, so I have to keep going. There's another half, another turn. And that's barely fitting. So that's what I had to do on all of them. Basically I had to put them in until I could just barely get the cotter pin in, and they're a little on the tight side, but I think that's totally fine. Okay, a little update here. So the front end was pretty much all put together. We've got brakes on, got the drums on, got our bearings in, and brake rods are all there. And I went to go do my brakes adjustment because this has all been changed, so the brakes need to be adjusted again. And kind of got into the rear brake rods because they're part of the adjustment. Found the emergency brake rod here is severely bent. It looks like something got wrapped around it and then probably pulled under it by the tire, and that probably is what bent that rod. And this one's not straight either. I mean, it's probably straight enough, but so I just pulled them out because I have the new ones anyways. And then in order to get the cotter pins out, I had to get the wheels off. To do that, I had to jack the car up, which we have to do that to adjust the brakes anyways. And since we're here, I'm just going to pull the drums, take a look inside there and see what we see. You can see the shock links are dirty like the front. I mean, they're probably still good if I get some rebuild kits. Although the front shock link, driver's side, had a shock link. I took it off. That's the shock link that came off the driver's side, but there was not one on the passenger side, so I didn't put this one back on. I'll have to get one for the front. So now we're just gonna pull this and see what it looks like inside. I think sometimes they can be kind of welded on there.
There's a rinse brake too.
Okay, this one's got straight bearings, no tapered bearings. What was that? That was a Woodruff key. This is probably a seal.
Not anymore.
The shoes are pretty thick. Don't see any issues, except for there's a little chunk taken out of it right there, but it's not a big deal. The drum actually is a lot smoother than the front's. No gouges hanging out of it, so that's in okay condition. Yikes! That was a good one. We're replacing hub seals in the inners. So this snap ring has to come out, and I kind of like this one because you can get it with just a screwdriver. You don't have to have special snap ring pliers. You don't have to have any special tooling. It just comes out with a screwdriver. And then I was trying to pry the seal out for the other side like this and hit it with a crowbar, but it wasn't moving. And I was reading online, someone said just drop the drum on the ground and the bearing will slap against the seal and it'll pop out. And I was very surprised that worked. So there's the bearing all cleaned up. I don't know what the end's going on the ends here. It's like almost like it was rotating inside, but then what's all these sideways scratches? It's like somebody ground it down on the front and back. So maybe I need new bearings. Like it's starting to pit there. I think I'll be packing these to do the trip that we're gonna do this week, and then I'll get another set of bearings probably. They look like they're usable for a little bit, but I don't know what's going on the ends. The other ones look the same way. Almost like it was drug across the ground or something like that. Ready to go on. Got the new seals in. Their clips are in. When I pulled these off the car, one of them had this cork seal in it, and the other one had a little piece of rubber, but that disintegrated. I mean, the cork's not doing too good either. I went to Sacramento Vintage Ford, and the guy there said that there's not supposed to be anything here from factory. So I don't know if somebody made that, or maybe he was mistaken, but I found this O-ring in our O-ring set that fits right in there. So I'll run those. I don't really think you probably need much of a seal there because of the tapered shaft. You're not really going to get any grease coming out that way, but I'll put them on there just for fun. Getting ready to finish adjusting the brakes here. Just throwing the wheels on. And I was looking at the cracks. I don't know if you guys remember when I first got the car, I noticed some cracks in the wheels. Now that I have them off, I can see the back sides of them. So I marked them. They're getting kind of big. So that's a decent crack. 4 of them in this wheel. I marked date and mileage so I know if they're getting bigger. I think they are. I'm assuming it's just straight steel, so I could probably have them TIG welded, but backside and the front side, it'd probably be fine. This one, 2 there, one there, spreading, 1 there, and then this one has 1, 2 on that side, and that one. So that's cool. And then the spare actually has 1 ending there, but it goes all the way back. Keeping an eye on them, and then hopefully I can get them welded up before there's a catastrophic failure. All right, I went around in circles a bunch of times, but I think I got all the brakes adjusted. Followed Paul Shin's video. It's a pretty good video on how to adjust these brakes. Basically, I make this tool to hold the pedal down inside the car at different heights, and then come down here and adjust the clevis pins to make sure the wheels are a certain tightness depending on how far the pedal is down. So everything should be done at the wheel. Also put the new rear brake rods in and got those all tightened up. New anti-rattlers. So these are just basically little springs that hold tension on the brake rods so they don't rattle around and make noise. But you know, this car's got 1,000 other things rattling, so I'm sure it's not going to make a difference. The jam nuts and cotter pins still need to be done, but I didn't want to go to drive the car first to make sure there's no more adjustments I need to make. So while I was down here looking around, I noticed this is the main service brake shaft. So when you step on the pedal, it rotates this. And it's got a little bit of play there. And over here, decent knock. So it could use some new bushings. I'm not going to worry about it right now. A couple other things I noticed. Just glanced up here at the transmission. Noticed this crack in the... That is the flywheel housing, and then I Googled it real quick. Apparently they crack quite often. That one seems like quite a large crack. And then also, you can see one in the engine mount right there. So the engine mount's cracked. The flywheel housing has a big crack in it, and it goes all the way up front. I'm kind of willing to drive it like that because I doubt that wasn't there when I bought it. Like, I'm sure all the miles I've put on it, it's been cracked like that. So I'll just keep an eye on it right now. I definitely want to fix that soon, but I don't think it's any different than it was when I got it. And it looks like there's a little buildup of material there, like somebody's probably brazed it previously. Apparently a common problem, and I'll have to figure out how to deal with that. Also, on the back of the transmission here, that is some sort of cover plate or seal or something, and like, I don't know what is going on there. It's not leaking very much. I may just not touch it right now, but you can see someone's globbed some sealant over the back of it. Judging by that flywheel housing, I think the transmission is going to end up coming out anyways, so we'll have to mess with all this at that time. But right now I just need to get this thing back on the ground, get a little test drive to test the brakes out, and make sure that the steering is all good after the kingpins and everything. So focused on the brakes for that project that I forgot that we even did the kingpins, and wow, the steering is so much lighter. It's almost one-handed, like I can do it one-handed now. So it's darting around the road a little bit, but I think that's because I forgot to adjust the toe, so I'll have to go back and adjust the toe. And there's a little bit of play in the wheel, but I think that's just the steering box. The steering box needs to be rebuilt. But other than that, like, the steering is much nicer now, so I'm happy with that. The brakes, I mean, the pedal is so much higher now, like, I can step on it, I get a good amount of power, I can really slam on it. I'm not gonna be able to lock them up like I should, but there's a lot more power in them now. Pedal's a lot higher. The brakes pull to the left a little bit, so I'll have to tighten up that right front wheel. Man, the steering is so much smoother. It just turns now like it should. One of the things I was reading about the flywheel housing was that if they're cracked, that could cause hard shifting. So that might be part of my problem with not being able to downshift this thing. And then, so Dave, the guy that helped me with the kingpin reaming, he let me drive his car, and my gosh, the shifting was so smooth, and I was actually able to downshift it on my first try. So there's definitely something wrong with this car, whether it's that flywheel housing. I mean, that's my guess right now, is it must have some sort of, it's not straight on, or something is messed up with the flywheel house. I also do hear this knock in the chassis, like when the engine is under load and we're kind of at speed, maybe 40 miles an hour, 35. and I can't get it on microphone, but it's like a slow thud. It seems like it goes with the driveline speed. So maybe that has something to do with the flywheel housing also. All right, I just got a few things to finish up here. I got the headlights fixed after I dropped that bulb. I got 2 new bulbs came in, and then focused them with the screw on the back here, and then threw the lenses on. And now, well, I was going to show you them on the wall, but I have the battery disconnected because I'm working on the alternator, so those won't turn on. So the alternator, we're having the issue with the belt being off to the side a little bit, so I got a new pulley for it. This one is a little bit closer to the alternator rather than having that shoulder, so that was the old one. So the belt is moved a bit closer to the alternator, and then we're switching over to the thicker Model A belt. So this is the one that was on it, and I actually ordered that one for the Model A part supplier. So hopefully those 2 things will give us a solid connection to the alternator, and we won't have a slipping belt anymore, which is good because when you turn the headlights on with those bulbs, it actually puts a decent load on it. I've got all the brake cotter pins installed except for this one because we were having the brakes pulling to the left a little bit, so I tightened this one up. I'm gonna go test drive it again, make sure it's not pulling left anymore, and then I'll put the real cotter pin in there. And then I still need to adjust the toe. I need to go hit all the grease points with the grease gun. If I get to it, I'd like to try to fit the hood, but we may not get to that. That belt is looking pretty dang good now. Hopefully I'm not worrying about that anymore. We got the toe set, so it should drive a bit better now. I'm just gonna go for a quick test drive to make sure everything works, and then we'll be good to go. Come on, baby, come here. Come here. All right, so it's all back together. We were gonna go on a little road trip today, but there's 2 issues. One, when I went to test drive it, I'm getting a lot of shaking in the steering wheel, 30 to 40 miles an hour. I believe it's this right front wheel out of balance, something along the lines of that. It's odd because I never felt that before, and I didn't rotate the tires or anything. The only thing that changed was the toe adjustment, so I may need to do some more work on that, or move the tires around and see if I can get a setup where it doesn't shake the car. But the other thing is what I showed you guys earlier, the flywheel housing crack. And I was just gonna run it, but when I went on my test drive, everything that I was feeling was stuff that I felt before, but all makes sense now with that crack there. The noises, the hard shifts in the transmission, all of that just makes sense with that giant crack in the flywheel. I'm not sure that I wanna do a 300-mile trip on the car with it like that. So I decided I will drive this car, and then when we come back, we'll dive into, it's going to be a big job. It's not a little job to replace that. So I'm sure that I'm going to do what I always do and fix a bunch of other stuff along the way and turn it into a much larger project than it needs to be. But I want a good running car, so a little opportunity to fix a bunch of stuff at once, and hopefully it's not down for too long. But man, it looks good, doesn't it? I kind of add it all up in my head, and it gets a little overwhelming with all the stuff that needs to be fixed on it. But, you know, it is a 100-year-old car, and just got to focus on one little thing at a time, and eventually it'll get there. Yeah, probably engine and transmission is going to come out. But we'll work on that next time.